Welcome to BurnerCast episode 2, everybody. I'm Joey Strutz. We got Brad Hosmer and McKenna Seacrest here with us again. And I think I speak for all three of us. I can't say just enough how thankful we are that you all tuned in with us week one. Our premiere was very, very successful, and we are very glad that you all tuned in and that you're back again this week.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I'm really glad all three of us can come together and meet different people and support promoting ballooning together.
And some of you will notice, episode 2, we got some upgrades here. We got some wall art. We got a haircut because people said my hair was too spiky and I don't take care of myself. So when it's been 20 below for the last 2 weeks in Wisconsin, you got to give me a break, guys, all right? So I got a haircut this week, so hopefully we're good now, all right? So any comments, send me a message, all right?
Yeah, right you are about that. We will take any and all feedback we can get. If you've got feedback, just feel free to send us a message. We'll always listen to constructive criticism. We got a great episode for you planned tonight. Our guest tonight is undoubtedly one of the best competitive pilots in the United States. He has not finished lower than 10th since 2010 in a national championship and has represented Team USA in 4 of the last World Championships. He was also creator of one of the most successful hot air ballooning multimedia hubs ever, BalloonPong. Please give a warm welcome to our special guest tonight, Joe Zvada. All right, welcome to the show, Joe.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so the first thing we're gonna have you do, can you give us just a little introduction of, who you are in ballooning, some notable accomplishments?
Sure. Yeah, I am Joe Zvada. I have been a pilot. It'll be 20 years this year. I got my license when I was 16. And my flying, I've done a little bit of of assortment of flying, but majority I'd say in competition, and that's where my focus has been. And I've had some reasonable success in different competitions, and I've really enjoyed that. So yeah, and other efforts with balloon video, videos, YouTube videos, website, sort of trying to spread the good word of ballooning. So
absolutely. Can you tell us just a little bit about how you were really introduced to ballooning?
Yeah, I don't really remember. I was really young. My dad helped out at the local airport, had an air show and balloon festival, and I don't know, just got hooked, and really young and stuck with it. And then was able to get connected with some balloonists in Northeast Ohio, where I grew up. There's a good population of active balloonists there, always has been in the Akron area. And they were eager, especially Carol Weiner, to help out somebody that had an interest and no money, and was able to stay involved and eventually get my license, and then eventually my own balloon.
So you mentioned Carol Weiner. Did you really grow up kind of around the season shapes then?
Yeah, that's how I got started, was with Carol and Kenny and Carol Carrie, and the local, started out local flying when they flew around the area. So their main launch area was 10 minutes from where the house where I grew up. And so I helped them out crewing in the local area a lot, and then eventually got involved with the shapes and kind of more on the road, I guess. Pretty early on, I did some trips with them. I don't know, when I was 14 or 15, and then as soon as I had my license, she had me in a vehicle driving to the next spot. So it was a lot of fun.
So that experience never made you want to be a shape pilot or anything? It always was just straight competition?
If anything, it was the opposite.
So how did that kind of come about then? Again, you start, it happens, I feel like, more than we think about it, but you start as helping all these shape pilots, and certainly, you may have been around events where there was targets, but it wasn't something you guys focused on. So what kind of led you to start getting into competition ballooning?
Well, the shape flying, and I never flew the shapes. I was
Right.
only crew at that time. It was a lot of fun, and the aspect of is sort of the team. It's one thing that draws me to ballooning is the team aspect of the sport, and that was a huge team. It's a huge team for one shape. It's an even bigger team for the four shapes that were often on the road together. And those were big shapes, those, the 1,000-pound envelopes. So it was,
Wow.
quite something to do. And the amount of people that we took, as well as the local people that we picked up, the local volunteers, so those friendships and things like that were really special and still are. However, when looking at my own sort of path in ballooning, the amount of work that a shape takes and the amount of money, it was, if anything, just too much for me to handle. And then you combine that with my natural competitive streak that I think I definitely have. Then competition ballooning was an obvious direction that I was going to take at some point, and I just really liked it. So it kind of expanded from there. Started out with just like trying it out. I actually started, my first competition was experience other than observing, just being a spectator as I crew for something else, another balloon, was I crewed with, I went with Paul Petrin to the 2004, I think it was 2004 National Championship as his crew, his only crew. And that was my first experience in competition ballooning, and he ended up winning. So it was a good first exposure to that level of ballooning.
Yeah, see, I always wondered that about you because I knew your backstory is kind of along with the Seasons team, and I'm good friends with Kim and Adam, so of course the same thing was with them. It's like, okay, so we grew up around more corporate stuff, and then we got racers, and Joey and I were talking about this on the last episode. It's like, okay, so I grew up near Battle Creek, he grew up near Howell. It's like, no wonder we got racers. It's all we knew as kids was just guys like you coming in targets and cheering you on. It's like, well, yeah, it makes sense why we got the path we're on. So it's really cool to see, somewhat, you had an interesting path, and ours is kind of like, okay, well, that makes sense, kind of more a straight path.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I'm always up for trying new things too. So, when I got the chance, I mean, as I remember it, Paul happened to be in town and was going to the Nationals in a couple weeks and didn't have crew. And I was like, I don't really have a job, so I could go with you. And then so I just jumped at the chance. And so I'm always open to trying new things like that in ballooning, especially. And then once I was in, I was hooked.
So how soon after that first Nationals then, because you said you got your license at 16, you would have been what, 14, 15 around that time maybe?
I got my license in 2001.
Oh, I was way off then, my bad.
And then, so I would have got my first balloon in 2005. So maybe the end of 2004.
So basically, after the experience, you just got straight into competing after that when you got the Freebird.
Yeah, I was on a trajectory to get a balloon. That was a goal, and then then I got a balloon that was an okay competition balloon. Not as good as some, but better. It wasn't a 90. It was an Aurora 70. So, it worked out to just kind of be able to go and test the water in some local competitions in Ohio, which is also like a great, Akron's got a lot of balloonists, and then Ohio and the Midwest have a lot of competitions. So it made it really easy to see the path where, I can do this more frequently, and, I enjoy it. So I'm going to, try to do it. And at that time, and almost the case now, you can do a competition literally every weekend, somewhere within a 4 or 5 hour drive in the summertime. So yeah, once I got going with my own balloon, then it, I guess I had to build my hours for a year. to be able to qualify to more events. But then like 05 into 06 and 07, that was just, I was still in college, and the summer would come around and it would just be like, I just go from balloon event to balloon event and live off of the pilot dinners and the whatever prize money I could scrape together. So
Wow.
Really interesting.
That really brings me to the next thing. You got your start in competition with obviously the Aurora, which was really cool to see you absolutely just ripping that thing into targets. Like it's one thing to see the pilots with like racers come into it, but like seeing an Aurora or even like some of the bigger balloons coming in and killing it like that is really cool. Do you find like it's difficult to adjust after you've switched to balloons? So like obviously when you went from the Bird to the Cameron, or like switching from the Cameron to the Zing or the Zing to the Lindstrand. Has there been
the biggest transitions obviously from a standard shape to a racer. That was a big thing. And towards the end of so I flew the Aurora 70 from like 05 through 2010 at the national championship. And by the end of that, it was getting really tired, porous. And at the same time, the event, the flights were getting longer. David Levin was the director in Battle Creek in the 8, 9, and 10 nationals. And there were some just like really long flights, and really, flights that required a lot of cycling up to high altitude, which just, the balloon only had 35 gallons of gas. So, and then it became porous. So at the end of that, I was like, if it was going to be a long flight, I would just tie the vent line up so I wouldn't use it, because in order to make it to the end of the flight, I was just going to have to fly as efficiently as possible and not vent unless it was absolutely necessary. So
Wow.
at that point, not only was it a fat balloon and a limited fuel, but it was also starting to get tired in other ways. And so it was a big change to go from that balloon into a racer. And I had some experience in racers previously. Chase Donner lent me his balloon Lindstrand racer for the 2008 World Championship. I flew it at the Nationals and at the World Championship that year. And then in 2011, Matt Torgerson let me borrow his Lindstrand racer for the national championship in Battle Creek, because it became obvious that by 2011, like I wasn't able, forget competing. I couldn't get through the whole flight. I just didn't have enough gas, even with an auxiliary tank for inflation. So I had some experience in racers. So it was a good, I had some background in it to make the transition, but it was still a big step. And luckily I had gotten, everyone seems to sort of like, I think in a racer, you have to find your limit. You got to establish that, the balloon has a limit. It's 1,000 feet a minute, comfortably stable. And then, there's a maximum in the manual, and it can be a different experience depending on the wind conditions with shears and stuff like that. So you kind of have to identify what you're comfortable with, and that can you can end up sometimes to identify that you sort of scare yourself and say, okay, I don't want to do that again. And I was able to get all that done previously in the previous hours I had in racers. So I was able to go in with when I finally made the transition for good. I was able to sort of go in with a plan and say all right, I'm going to fly this I'm comfortable flying a balloon, and then slowly sort of just dial up the racer characteristic and use that as an advantage. So I wasn't jumping in at 1,500 up and down, 1,500 feet per minute up and down. I was really flying it like a round balloon, and then slowly getting more comfortable with different maneuvers and doing them more aggressively. So
Mm-hmm.
And then
I
jumping
kind of
from racer to
that.
racer of the different manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
not a huge, for me anyways, not a huge jump. I try to think about what the difference is. So, like size of the parachute, the vent, because that's a big deal. Like the Zing was kind of small compared to others. The
Mm-hmm.
One Grand, you kind of have to pull a little more because it puffs up out of the top. So you have to pull a little more to get the same amount of air out, like versus the like the Cameron that I flew anyways. So
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And then the shape a little bit, like the Zing was tall, so it you had to kind of you couldn't really ride the same, like, so there's some wind layers that the balloon was just too tall to catch the same way that a
That's
small
interesting.
56 racer might. So you kind of just, I don't know, I kind of think
Yeah.
about that stuff and then make adjustments in my flying.
I have a question kind of related to that. Do you think that there's situations where you would need a racer to win a competition, or do you think you can do just as well in a round balloon?
Well, the what are the other pilots flying?
Um, like if everyone else was flying racers,
Yeah,
like is
then
there
you need a racer.
situations that
Yeah.
just to like quickly get into those layers?
Yeah, and it depends on the competition too. So like if it is a, like a hare and hound, like a more sort of traditional competition with only one or two tasks, that's not going to require large maneuvers like fast, high, up and downs. Then the round balloon can do perfectly fine. But at a at a high level competition like a world championship or a nationals, um, yeah,
I
the
know
round
you
balloon.
do have to fly like a lot more aggressively.
Say again.
Oh, I know you do have to fly like a lot more aggressive.
Yeah, and there would be times like when those last couple of years I flew the round balloon, before it kind of started to get tired, I was flying it pretty aggressively, and there would just be like days where, like, say you had to cycle to like 3,000 or 5,000 feet in between targets, there would just be like, there's a line of racers over here who got up and down a lot faster and are going to hit the target. And then all the round balloons are lined up half a K to the right because it took so long to get up. And then they can't get back down because there goes the target, because it's just, you can't do it fast enough. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
that's
clear
something.
advantage.
Yeah, I was wondering that because sometimes like I'll be navigating somewhere in my round balloon and I'll be like, I feel like I couldn't like get up to those layers like and fly like a racer.
Yeah. I
But
think I don't want to discourage people from competing in round balloons, but there is a clear difference, and you just gotta know that going in, I think.
yeah. So kind of moving into a different topic. I know you've traveled a lot all over the world in ballooning, and we're curious about your experience at the World Air Games in Dubai. Do you want to
Oh
talk
yeah,
about that?
yeah. The world, that was an experience. Yeah. So I forget. There was some question. I forget the qualification requirements at the time, but there was some question whether or not that I was even going to qualify, and I think I got one of the last spots. So it was it wasn't last minute, like you got to go next month, but it was. I wasn't really counting on it. It was on the bubble, and I was like, if I can go, I can, like, I'll try to figure it out and go. But if not, I'm not going to be upset about it. So so when I was able to go, it was great, and I kind of went in with no expectations, knowing that it would be just a fun experience, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
We flew from the Palm Island. We flew out in the desert over the dunes. The competition wasn't great, but the event itself was cool, and it was great to be a part of the entire World Air Games, which I really enjoyed. My dad came with me as crew, and we really enjoyed watching the other events, like remote control airplanes and skydiving and sailplane, things like that. It was really cool to see all
Yeah,
together.
that's a
To talk to the other competitors as well, like the other athletes that were in the other sports was really interesting. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a real neat experience for you guys being your background. You mean you live and work, flying. That's what you do. But on the World Air Games topic, why do you think it was just the competition was? I mean, I noticed looking back at the test shoots, a lot of hare and hounds, watership downs. You just think it was the unfamiliar with competition ballooning in that area, or just the topography of the area? What do you think?
There was a lot of restrictions in airspace, in timing of when you could use airspace, and we couldn't fly above like 2,500 feet, something like that. They have the I forget what the building's name is. That's the tallest building.
I know what you're talking about.
At least at the time, it was the tallest building in the world. But our airspace ceiling was below that building, so we couldn't fly above that building. So it was really restricted on that. And then there was different things on the ground we had to avoid at different times, and other things we had to avoid at all times, palaces and things like that. And then you get warnings of like, okay, we're flying near this palace, and it is a red zone on your map, but it, if you spook the prince's lions, then the whole thing shut down. So yeah, it was a lot
That's
of
really
weird
cool.
things like that fed into the way the competition was run.
So essentially, you'll probably never see an event like that or a location of an event like that for like a Worlds, or you're definitely not going to find it like that in America, I assume. So it's kind of a really unique experience you had, I feel like.
Yeah, it felt at the time that this was like a once in a generation sort of experience, because people have flown in Dubai. There has been events in Dubai, but this event seemed to have more access. And Mike Howard was the sort of the balloon organizer, who is a pilot, a competition pilot, and he had a sense for what was possible with the winds, because the other cool thing was the wind patterns that were there in December of that year. And I assume it's a wintertime pattern, but it allowed for the land breezes in the morning to sort of develop at the coast. So you could fly on the surface, you could fly out to sea, and then you pop up to 1,000, 1,500 feet, and it's blowing back into the mainland. So and we exploited that, I think, every morning flight except one or two. So it was there pretty consistently.
So moving on here, next topic we wanted to talk to you about was nationals. So it's no surprise we've seen so much improvement out of you from your time at nationals. So we were looking at some of your results. I've got them pulled up here. You went from 27th in 2008 to just 3 years later getting a top 10 in 2011. And you have not cracked outside that top 10 ever since that. You've always been right up there, 5th place, 8th place, 3rd place, 2nd place. How do you just stay dialed in and just so laser focused every single year? Like, do you have any particular strategy or anything?
I think the results kind of speak to the approach. And if you go back even further, like I finished 5th in 2006. But I'd almost call that a fluke. I didn't really, at that time, I really didn't know what I was doing in competition, especially at the nationals. And, at that time, I didn't have a computer, so paper maps were the thing. And I had no idea about paper map preparation, because it took a lot of work to put your PZs on there and the targets and things like that. And I got a lot of help from help and guidance from Paul Petrin, but also I remember Tom Roush and Roy Smith were they practically did my map, and their crew Liz practically did my map. So I got, that sort of like helped feed into that good result. But I think you're right. The trajectory of, I think like the next year I finished like 13th, and then the next year was like 27th. The 27th year was just a, like that was just a bad, like you just get bad years at any competition. And that was just a bad year. That was the year of Chuck Walls's accident at the Nationals. And it was my first competition in a racer. So, a lot of things that kind of fed into that. But from that point on, from the 2008 World Championship, I started taking more of a sort of just like a planned approach to preparation for a competition, like specifically for the event, like, waypoint files and maps and GPSs and things like that, but also in like my practice flying, and try to really get comfortable with and really good at different maneuvers in the balloon, so that I tend to be sort of like so I guess more of a natural flyer. So like things just sort of flow, and to like to be competent enough in maneuvers, and a wide like sort of variety of maneuvers in the balloon, is really beneficial. So you don't have to think about it. Like, okay, it feels like I need some right. I'm just gonna pop up, 1,000 feet
Yeah.
and grab some right and go back down really quickly, or whatever the maneuver is.
Yeah, and just getting that practice and experience.
Yeah. And so that was my approach in like 9, 10, and 11, or like 9 and 10. But I was handicapped by the balloon. 9 and 10, I was back in the round balloon. And those were the years where like I just simply like I just barely finishing flights in the balloon, and at the same time more people were getting racers, so it was harder to compete. And I think if I recall, I think I was the highest finishing round balloon in those years. It was just outside the top 10, and then so the balloon has a big part to do with it. And then like in 2011 I finished 8th, I think, and have been able to stay that or better in the preceding years. But then to go from like 8th, 5th, 6th, I had a bunch of 5ths that I thought I was never going to do better than. It was just like taking it to the next step. And really, there's no one thing, but it's a lot of little things and tweaks, and really getting comfortable with the balloon, and really dialing in the team, like my crew. I've got a really core group of people on the ground that we're all comfortable with each other, and sort of can anticipate moves, and that allows me to make better decisions on the flying, because I don't have to worry about what's happening, and setting up the balloon on the ground, things like that. So all that kind of stuff together has worked out well so far.
Yeah, I feel like a big part of it is just getting that experience and like really knowing your balloon and feeling so comfortable. Like I don't fly competition, but I feel like flying almost every day this summer in my 90, like I know what the wind's gonna do, and I can land almost anywhere I want to land most of the time. And so I just feel like a big part of it's getting that experience.
Yeah, experience, and you're right, being comfortable in your equipment, comfortable in the so like one of my big motivations in ballooning in general is trying to match my skill set with what nature provides on the day, and that is like maneuvers in the balloon, but it's also like knowledge and understanding of the weather, so that I can see like what the day is offering, and then have the skills to go execute it. And there's really no, like for me anyways, there's no better example of that than good results in a competition, because everybody's trying to do the same thing. But that is true, I think, in any flying. And like flying in
So true.
over the Grand Canyon that folks are doing these days is a good example of that is sort of like when your knowledge and skill come together to get the most out of the day is really motivating for me.
So we were kind of wondering if there was one specific nationals that you could do over and do better that you learned from, and like you could go back and do it again. What do you think you learned from that experience, and what would you do to improve the next time? Like if you redid it.
Well, I think I could. I mean, I'd go back and redo all of them and try to do better.
Yeah.
But
Just
like
what
to
you've
pick
learned.
one, that's a really good question. I definitely, I pick up things in all of them, in every competition, in every flight, really, that that I want to improve and ways to get better. So to go back, I think obviously I go back to maybe the one where I finished in second and try to, do something a little more on a particular flight to come out on top. But yeah, I don't know.
Cool.
That's a really good question.
See, because we were thinking about it, because you've been so close so many times. We feel like, coming in the last day, you're right there. Like you're within a couple hundred points, and just something, either, you get Red comes out and kills it, or Johnny comes out and kills it. And like, there's no, hiding it. Like you're going to win one day, I feel like. And it's just like, you're almost to that plateau, but it's just something doesn't go your way. And it's like,
Yeah. The toughest one to swallow, I think, was 2018 in Shreveport, because I led all week, and on the last flight, I ended up, like these decisions, like they sort of, everything sort of leads to each other. So like in the air, I kind of got unlucky and got a bad shift. But I got a bad shift in the wind because I was late and it was starting to get hot and it was starting to get a little thermally and the puffs were coming inconsistently. And I just got a puff at the wrong moment. And I think Rhett got 1,000 points and I got 200 points or something like that. And that ended up being the difference. But that actually, you go back to like the start of the day, like I was playing a little defense on that day, and I wasn't doing, like I wasn't sticking to my game plan, which was to go out, be decisive, be one of the first in the air, and just go get the job done. And I strayed from that day, and I was late in the pack, and that ultimately led to getting a bad shift and a bad score. So maybe that's the one.
Is that the same nationals, or maybe one of my instructors maybe bumped you out of the way from the target as well? Is that the same one I'm thinking of?
I don't know about that one.
Oh, I won't name names. I don't want to do that. I don't want to embarrass her too much.
No, this one was straight. Shift.
Okay.
And Shreveport was hot and sweaty. Like the baggie got caught on my hand, like on my arm, because it was wet on one of the tests that morning. So yeah, so kind of.
Dang.
So I want to talk about it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, McKenna. You're good.
I was just saying, like, I feel like the way I think about it is it's not just like one event you do over, but it's all the like cumulatively little things you've learned from each flight and each event that would inspire you to do better, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that's really like an ongoing pursuit. Is
yeah, like it's not just one event.
Yeah, it's constantly. I guess in just like having maybe some competitive traits in my personality. There's also little obsessive traits in my personality, and I let that sort of run wild and in sort of ideas to improve and in ways to improve, and then executing on those. And yeah, so I spend a lot of time on that and tweaking little things like my map computer platform or my baggie organization, or all the way up to my flying. So
speaking of Shreveport, since we clearly can tell it's your favorite place to fly, what is your thoughts on the upcoming team nationals that are kind of making a return to the U.S.? Are you okay with the format of like ABC, or would you rather have it be like AAA, where you can get, Nick and Chase as your teammates, or do you like the balance? And kind of how hard was it to find your teammates? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I really like, number one, I'm super excited to have the format back at this level. Like the format is, Canton, Ohio has hosted a teams event for several decades, or however long they've been doing it, and that continues. But to have it back at the national championship level, it's great for ballooning. It's great for the HACD and BFA. It's good. It's fun for pilots to go fly. So I'm super excited about that. I like the ABC approach to it. When the teams were designed by the people at NABA in the beginning, late 90s or whenever it was, like the whole intent was to help new pilots connect with experienced pilots and help grow the sport and get people involved and help people progress. So I think that's the intent of teams, and I think it's good that this event maintains that. And so when I put my team together, I really like that. That was the goal. Like it wasn't, I wouldn't say necessarily to get the next or the best team, like when I started to think about it, but it was like what's in the spirit of the event. Who do I want to fly with? That's number one, that's fun. Number two, we can do well. Number three, that we can all learn from each other. So I settled, or luckily, my first two choices were willing to jump on, and that was Cameron Wall and Kim McGee.
Yeah, we were just curious because we see the Isley team is kind of struggling to get that C pilot. And we just kind of, Joey and I were going the other day and just like, what if he's just going through his Rolodex and trying to call every C pilot? Because I even had a pilot call me and say, hey, can I borrow your balloon if I fly team nationals? And I'm like, man, I'm trying to fly. Don't be using mine at team nationals. Because Cameron ran into the same thing when he first got his balloon. I had mine and he wanted to use mine. And I'm like, okay, you can fly like the local stuff, but I don't know about nationals, man. Like, I don't know about you flying my balloon at nationals, but yeah, I think it'll be a cool concept. I'm okay with the limited amount of teams. I think they're fairly balanced. I think, like you said, with the Canton of teams, it's good. It's cool to see. And I think the Nels team will be good because they've flown that team nationals in Canton so many times. And yeah, you got some sleeper teams in there, like, Rhett's team, I think will be solid because Lucas is a very good pilot, even though he's a C. You got some sneaky pilots on there. So it'll be really interesting to see how it goes down. Yeah. And like, you can kind of see through my nobleness about it as well. Like Cameron is probably not a C pilot. He's a very good C pilot. So yes. Yeah. There's a little, we're happy to have, I think we have a good team. Yeah.
Absolutely. We were going through the teams, and that's your team really stuck out to me as one that's, I think really, really going to surprise a lot of people and do really well down there.
I hope so. I like flying in Shreveport. It can be challenging. Kim and I have, we've already been taught. We did like a Zoom thing to kind of get to know each other, because I've flown with Cam a little bit, but never with Kim. And Kim, Kim's resume is really intriguing, and like professional level, lots of interesting balloon sort of accomplishments and flights and things. So I'm excited to learn more about her approach and try to help everybody progress.
So the next two topics here, they really go hand in hand. So we see you competing at a world level. You've done 4 world championships through the FIA, and you've undoubtedly done phenomenal at all of them. And you really see more of the digital tasks coming into play over in the world competitions. What are your thoughts on the U.S. like finally starting to bring those and more and more events out here? You see like the new digital loggers and everything finally like coming around to our country. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's really exciting and really good for ballooning. So what these tools, what any mapping tool or GPS, allows pilots to do, whether it's competitive pilots or otherwise, is really you're really sort of expanding the envelope of precision. It allows you to get more precise in your navigation, which, if you're good, if you pay attention and try to put some effort into your approach to flying, like that'll translate into precision in how you steer the balloon to a location or whatever the case. So that's really what they all, like, in my mind, that's like the intent of a new navigational tool. And the logger, the new balloon life sensor is, I've not flown with it, but what I understand of its development and its capability is it's going to increase that envelope and sort of tie together the task calling with what we have for navigational tools, in terms of sort of I guess in the last few years, like the navigational tools we use are sort of more advanced than what the tasks are, or how the tasks are able to call, if that makes sense, to be called. So like what you're seeing is like pilots are getting more and more precise. Like, if it's just like a standard judge declare goal, like if you're not within half a meter, then you're in 75th place. So these will allow more complex and interesting tasks to sort of spread out, what we've seen as like a major increase in the level of precision, the quality of competition across the board, especially at the world championship level. So I think it's great. And I hope, like I said, I've not used the tool yet, but I hope that like it's got the possibility to streamline our flight decks to sort of maybe have fewer instruments. So right now, like I have on my competition deck, I've got a computer, an iPad, a GPS, whatever logger we're using, and then like probably another GPS, and then a phone. And they all do different things. And some of them are there for backup because like you can't, like the way things are now or have been, like they don't all connect together, and you sort of need a backup because you can't rely on one. So I'm hopeful that this will reduce the need for redundancy, as well as better communication between devices will make for fewer devices. And and more, if that's true, then I think more people will see that, even in like in non-competition flying, to where it's an advantage, and it could benefit a wider group of pilots.
Well, one thing that I wonder about that is, do you think that it can be too distracting for pilots to have all those electronics on board their basket?
I mean, it depends on how you use them. Like you can get distracted by anything.
Yeah.
So like I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think like as the pilot, you just sort of like I think it's on you or on us to identify that for you,
Yeah.
for the individual. And then they're tools, so I think you can use them too much and it's detrimental, and I think you can use them too little and you're not getting the full advantage. So I think you got to figure out what works for the individual, and then apply
That's a
it.
good point. Cool.
Ideally, I would say, like, my goal with electronics, and like I have a pretty diverse, like there's a lot in there, and then on top of that I have a camera and 2 or 3 radios. So my goal with all that stuff is to, like, those are tools to allow me to fly the balloon better and give me more time to make decisions on navigation and to execute maneuvers in the balloon, or whatever the case is. So that's how I try to craft my approach to using them. And so it's all about having more time.
Yeah, they're just a tool and not like what you solely focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looking forward to future events, especially if they happen this year. How do you think COVID's going to affect future competitive events? And are you planning differently because of that?
Well, I'm hopeful that like there's like a light at the end of the tunnel for COVID. Maybe a little too optimistic, I don't know. So, but I'm signing up for events. The national championship was supposed, it was close to happening last year, and it was, a tough decision as to how, whether or not we would participate and how we would participate, meaning myself and my crew. We were definitely like, we were gonna, get accommodations off site at another hotel or another, or like an Airbnb or something, and just try to have like as little interaction with people as possible. So like if we're still in it, like that's what we would try to do again, and just make a decision on, I guess, pretty close in as to whether or not we're comfortable moving.
And looking at flying specifically, do you think that you haven't flown as much in the last year, and because of that you'll need to get back on your game and like fly more? You feel ready for that?
Yeah, definitely. I got maybe like 10 or 15 hours in 2020. So like the volume of hours are down, but in terms of like competition preparation, the quality of those hours were fairly low in terms of like, working on anything specific. So
That makes sense.
so yeah, so it was like a whole year of not flexing those muscles. So yeah, so I'm thinking, I was just talking with someone the other day about, like an early season training camp type of approach to try to get some, some of that stuff back online for sure.
Yeah.
You're almost gonna have to, because you're gonna have some guys that are just gonna try and fly nationals for the first time, and it's gonna be like, I haven't done this descent, I haven't done 1,000 feet in a year. It's like, this ground's getting closer than you think. It's just the little things that we don't think about that you're gonna have to tone in again.
Yeah, and it's not just flying. It's like reading the task sheet. It's consuming the weather prior to going into the briefing. Like, how do you reading what are your weather process and how do you consume that? And then like, there's been breaks when I've not flown for a long time, pushing a year, and it's like you almost forget how to put the basket together. At least for me, sometimes I step away that far, and it's like, you're kind of tripping over yourself trying to put the system together. So yeah, there's probably some work to do there.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
So believe it or not, even though we've talked about competition the whole time, you have done other things in competition. A couple of years at Fiesta, you flew for Phillips 66 for Scott Appleman. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? How did that kind of come about? And would you do it again, or would you rather just stick to flying a racer at Fiesta?
It was interesting. I enjoyed it. How it came about, they called me and asked if I was available. So I said, yeah. You'll have to ask them why they called me. I don't know. But it was a lot of fun. It was cool to be a part of such a professional outfit. I guess that was 2015, 2016. So it was a while ago now, but I strive, like part of my approach in my competition ballooning is to like, define a professional level of ballooning in sort of in the competition discipline. And they're defining that in the corporate and ride discipline of ballooning, and the way they structure their company and how they manage the clients and in the balloon, the pilots and the crews and the equipment. It was just really cool to see ballooning on that level, because it was I think it's fairly rare in ballooning. Like we're used to like the hobby approach, a lot of us, or small ride operations that have professionalism but not the scale, and they sort of had both. So it was really cool.
Cool.
The Phillips people were great. That like they had been involved for a while, so like that's always good. I think educating a new corporate sponsor on ballooning and why we can't fly sometimes would be more difficult, but they had already done it a few years with different pilots, so it was pretty turnkey, and they were like, they understood when we couldn't fly, and they understood the value of ballooning, so it was really just a good experience all around.
Awesome.
So I think one thing we've all really wanted to talk about with you is, I know me and Brad for sure, and I'm sure McKenna as well, but we really, grew up watching, the videos that you, Chase, and Nick made for BalloonPong. I mean, it was a huge part of my childhood and, getting more into the competitive side of ballooning. Can you talk about kind of how you guys came up with the idea, just to start the channel up, start the blog up, and all that?
Yeah. Just conversation. Like it started, and we why don't ballooning needs this. Why why isn't anyone doing this? And then eventually it was like, well, why don't we do it? And I'm sure there was probably like a linchpin moment where something triggered us to like take the plunge, but whatever that was, I don't specifically recall. But yeah, we jumped in and learned a lot along the way, but it was a lot of fun. And giving that exposure to ballooning, which had been done in the past. It wasn't necessarily the first time it was done. Like NABA did it through eballoon.com, and that kind of slowed or stalled, but and that's probably the void that we saw, and the inspiration that we had to start it up. So it was good. It was a lot of work, especially as the years went on, and that's eventually why it kind of petered out. But it was good. We really enjoyed it. I especially really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think one thing that was really so cool about it though is it got people not necessarily outside of ballooning, but like in ballooning, way more invested in the competition aspect. Like, I know personally, I grew up like 10 minutes from the Howell event, and like while I'd seen a few competitions before there, I had never really gotten invested on a national level. And I think just watching your guys' videos and just seeing what you guys do and learning more about it really helps intrigue me to more shoot to be that type of pilot, start competing more often. And I think it's really cool that you guys came up with something like that to not only just show off the world of competition ballooning, but just get more people involved with it.
Yeah, I think the visuals were that was sort of the main driver of its popularity. We put a lot of time in the words in the reports, and tried to like take we assumed some ballooning knowledge in those things. So like we referred, we used a lot of balloon language and terms and things like that, and referred to the left going away and things like that maybe was over, it was definitely geared towards a balloon audience. But I think the real, you're right, the real thing that drove the interest was the visuals. And it started with a central place just to post photos in an organized manner, as well as results. But then as the video cameras became more accessible and better quality, like that gave a whole different perspective on competition ballooning. That's what we were doing, but it's ballooning in general, sort of allowing more people to see it from that perspective. Really, I think has been good for ballooning as a whole, but it was a real driver in the balloon pong effort for sure.
It was cool when I was doing my training with Kim and Adam. you get to a certain point in your training and they're like, all right, we're just going to sit down on the couch for an hour. We're just going to watch balloon pong videos. So we literally watched you and Joe or you are Joe, I guess, and Nick, excuse me. And it was just, you got to the point of level flying. And, basically it's like, okay, so yeah, Nick makes all these maneuvers, but if you notice, and especially you too, you guys are level all the time. Like you guys, I don't feel like it's not herky jerky, up, down, up, down. It's like you guys are still level. And honestly, I credit that a lot to what I mastered level flying in my training. Like, I had such sporadic training due to my instructor schedules and this and that and weather. And he just, okay, just watch balloon pong videos, see what happens. And I came back in October and I flew level for the whole flight. And he's
Nice.
like, keep watching balloon pong videos. So that was whatever worked. I don't know what it did, but really did a good job.
That's cool. And, it's also interesting. I found it interesting to sort of to learn other people's flying styles and, how they, like Nick tends to like vent a lot, compared to other pilots and compared to me. So I've always enjoyed seeing when people post, sort of how the approach to their flying style and how they maneuver the balloon. But that's really cool that you watched it to that level and learned.
Yeah, I always thought it was cool, like back in the day looking at the videos. It's funny, I always remember that Finley video, I guess it's not that long ago. And here's you taking a picture of Mr. Burke over the target. Next thing you know, you just come in dead center. And it's just your focus on those videos to make them, well, one, such high quality, and two, for you to perform well. It's just like how you can just go, oh, taking picture, oh, dropping baggy a minute later. I always thought that was crazy. Like, you're zoned in the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, to McKenna's point earlier, like it can be a distraction. So I've had to check myself on doing too much of the camera stuff during the flight because it was hurting my results.
Did you ever think it took away from not so much took away, but took away from the other parts of events? So say, hey, I get flying a 5-part task and I come back and I'm supposed to take my nap. But instead, you got to edit this balloon pong video because you feel almost obligated to do so. Did you ever feel that kind of played a hand in stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, there was, and that's why, like I said, eventually kind of slowed. And, I think our last, really intense year doing it was maybe 2014 and then a little bit in 2015. And yeah, the expectations were too much to maintain the workload, and whether it was editing the videos or writing the stuff or putting the results out, people started to come to rely on that as a place to go for results. And it just we just didn't have enough time. And then on the last day of an event, you fly, you load out all your stuff, and then you go to the award ceremony and you're on the road for 6 or 12 hours, whatever it might be. And people are waiting for things. So, so yeah, that was, and then, the balloon pong, the website itself, kind of slowed. And then I shifted more into just focusing on videos for a few years. While also, I wrote a column in Ballooning Magazine consistently for 3 or 4 years, something like that. So what Balloon Pong really helped me identify as a desire for myself is just, I want to contribute, and there's different ways to contribute. Like you guys are doing this podcast, and, for a while I did Balloon Pong, and then I did videos and articles, and now I'm on the board of the HACD. So that's been an important part of my ballooning career, and Balloon Pong really set that. They sort of set the course for that.
Cool. So kind of moving on from that topic. So what would you say is your top 2 to 3 ballooning experiences?
That's a good question. Flying in Dubai is way up there. I didn't fly the best flight there off of the World Island, but flying over the Palm Island was super cool. I flew into an open copper mine in Arizona, with some pilots out there, Bob Romaneski and others. That was really cool. That was really cool, actually. I flew in Hawaii, on the Big Island of Hawaii with Andrew Hawley at the end of his Fly Every State project. That was really cool. And that came up at the last minute. So yeah, those are up there. The competitions are great, but I kind of look at the competition. Those are probably all individual flights, and then like the competitions are experiences. Like, and really, any of these international trips are way up there. I mean, it's the camaraderie that you get on the team that you bring, and I try to bring people that I want to be around, and they want to be around me, and are okay with the intensity of the competition at that level, because it's frankly exhausting from a physical and mental perspective. But what that sort of gets out of me and gets out of the team is that it's an experience that you're together with like a group of people sort of in the trenches at an international competition at a extremely cool place. Like, they don't have balloon events in ugly places, so you're always going to be in a really sweet spot, and those are really top experiences in ballooning. So like Saga, Austria recently, the most recent one, Austria in 2008, that was like, my first experience. So like what I didn't know on that trip, was more than I did know as far as expectations. So yeah, they're all really up there. But like last summer, I got to fly in Taos, New Mexico, into the Taos Gorge.
Really cool.
Yeah, so that was cool. And I try to look for the last few years, I've tried to look for more of those type of flights, and try to get some of those experiences other than just the competition.
I think it's really cool that you've been in ballooning for so long for someone that's your age, and you've got to experience all these things. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate. I really do, to be able to have to really get started so early. I feel like like this is too fun not to eventually find in my life, ballooning. So I feel like I would have got here eventually, but to be, that doesn't happen for everybody, because you don't have access to it, or you don't have, it just doesn't line up. To have that,
Yeah, for sure.
to be able to do that, and then to continue to do it is, I feel very fortunate, and
That's awesome.
yeah.
So what are some areas or experiences of ballooning you want to have that you haven't had? What are some of your future plans? And we talked about Hawaii, which was really cool. Dubai. What else is kind of on your bucket list per se?
Yeah, I keep a bucket list on my phone. I can pull it up. But because I missed that flight in Hawaii not in Hawaii, in Dubai from the World Island, one of the top things on my list is to fly from an island and then fly to an island, separate occasions. So like in Hawaii, I flew technically on an island, but it wasn't like I want to like make it a target, and there should be some risk involved. Like if you miss the island, you're looking for a boat. So like that's on my bucket list. I want to fly over like a big waterfall. I haven't been able to find any waterfalls. Fly over a mountain like they did recently over Pikes Peak, like that would be killer, or over the Sandias. I've always wanted to fly under a bridge because I've seen people do that. I don't know what the legality is there. And then from an island to an island, and then recent addition is specifically the Grand Canyon. So
I don't doubt you'll get all those done.
what about you guys?
Same.
I'd like to just fly, any international competition at any capacity at some point in time. And then, as you mentioned, flying over a waterfall, I've seen some of the stuff they've done out New York State, and I would just love to go fly out in that area of the country. Some of the scenery out there is just incredible.
I want to get all 50 states. That's kind of one of my goals.
You're gonna break Andrew's record.
No, my job is too demanding for that.
Yeah.
See, when you manage apartments and you try and take vacations, you can take them, but you're getting bugged all the time. And I don't want to be flying, like you said, in Hawaii and trying to focus. And, maintenance guy calls me about dumb stuff, stuff like that. I don't know. I mean,
I've quit a few jobs to take ballooning trips. So that's always on the table.
I have not. I like my job too much for that. It pays for the ballooning stuff. No, I don't know. I like the Japan trip. Sound fun.
I think for me, like, I want to travel the world and like just fly in like all those really cool places. And I also want to fly over the Cascades in Washington. And I also want to follow Vic Johnson and Larry Simberger's footsteps and fly over Mount Rainier.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize anybody had done that. That's cool.
Yeah, they did. It's so cool.
What's the how likely or how often does the weather present to be able to do a flight like that over Rainier?
I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know a lot of the details that went into it, but it seems like a really cool, just a really cool flight. Yeah,
that would be cool.
Yeah.
All right, so really the last thing we have for you is a segment we do on the show every week. We get questions in from some of our fans. Some have decided to stay anonymous, but others have asked, say my name when you ask the question. And we've just got a few for you. We're just going to kind of rapid fire them at you. So the first one comes from fellow Texas pilot Blake Aldridge. He wanted us to ask, what's your favorite Marvel movie?
Oh, my favorite Marvel movie. I really like Captain Marvel.
Okay, yeah.
Recently.
Got you.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one we got, it's an anonymous one. They asked, what's your favorite place in the United States to fly?
That's a good question. I mean, I really like flying in Ohio because that's where I learned to fly. It's where I grew up. So yeah, I guess home is always would be the one place I would say.
Our next one comes from your fellow teammate Cameron Wall. This is a pretty broad one. He had asked if you could have like a 3v3 of all-time pilots, USA versus the world. So basically, what pilots would you pick for both sides? If you had to pick three, U.S. pilots, 3 international. This is one he sent in to us last night, and we thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a good question. So much depends on the type of event, like who's the director, where is it at, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'd need more details, and I'd have to think about that one.
Gotcha. So our next one comes from Jenny Kerber. So she said, since you were once there, what advice would you give to like a young competitor looking to fly at that international level someday?
Stick with it, I guess. I think, luckily there's more avenues for the international experience than there was previously, with the junior worlds and the women world championship. So I think there's a clearer path for people who are just starting out to get to some kind of an international level competition. And I would say just stick with it. Like any pilot who's starting out and wants to be a competent, competitive pilot and have progression in their flying skills is it starts with volume. Like you just need to push a lot of volume of targets in competition flights and start honing in your style and your approach, your preparation, your skill set in the balloon and out of the balloon in terms of decision making, and then just stick with it, and the results will come, and eventually you'll qualify. and take advantage of when it happens, because there's a lot of pilots who kick themselves who qualified for something, and then for whatever reason can't go or decide not to go. So be ready to pull the trigger if you do happen to qualify.
Our next question comes from Brock Bame of Ohio. Which task do you find the most difficult to fly?
The most difficult single task is probably, you get into like the angles and elbows, and those can be pretty challenging. What makes the task calling really interesting these days, especially from somebody like Claude Weber in Europe, is the layering on a difficulty for an individual task, and then also like a whole flight and all the tasks together. So like in Austria, we had, I think it was probably the most difficult, challenging, in the highest level of difficulty competition flight I've ever had. And it was like a single, maybe 2 judge declared goals, and then like 3 tasks, and elbow, a land run, and like a 3D something or something like that were all pilot declared aspects of it. So you chose when you did your elbow, you chose when you did your land run, in the other one. So like adding that, it wasn't just like, okay, here's 2 targets and then an elbow, which we're kind of used to flying in that sequence in the States. It was like, all right, there's 2 targets out there, and then you got to do these other 3 things, and you got to figure it out yourself. So that approach to like the same sort of targets or same tasks that we've seen was really difficult. But yeah, elbow land run is a really difficult one standalone, just because it requires a little bit. It requires some math in your plotting and trying to identify what's the best result.
All right, our next one also comes from Blake Aldridge. So this one's an exact quote. He asks, how fast were you able to get the Aurora to come down? Anything less than 1,000 feet per minute, and I'll be disappointed.
Yeah, I maxed out around 1,000. It's interesting. So early on, when it was a little less hours, it kind of maxed out at 1,000, and it would get really ugly with distortion and dishing in and whatever. As it got more porous, it did that less, and I think like the air was just going through it. It wasn't pushing against it; it was just going straight through it.
Right.
I was able to push it up a little faster, and that was coming down. Going up, I was never able to get it more than 800 or 900 feet a minute.
All right, so we got one more. It also comes from Cameron Wall. So he asked if you think your experience with fixed wing aircrafts has helped, your ballooning competition skills. Like, do they go hand in hand?
Not really. I think being comfortable in the air and being able to look down and know what you're looking at, and because you can, especially the new pilots, like it's a whole different. You see this when you take passengers is up, like places that they lived for decades, they don't recognize once you get 500 feet in the air. So like I guess that would be the only crossover maybe. And you're looking at weather and stuff, but honestly my fixed wing flying is relatively limited compared to, so I got way more in a balloon than I do in fixed wing.
Gotcha. All right, well, that's all the time we've got for you this week from BurnerCast. We want to thank Joe Zvada for joining us this week. Excellent guest. Next week, we got world champion Dom Barefoot joining us on BurnerCast. We really hope to see you then. Thanks again for tuning in.